uppercut, try to hit me in the gut, thinking that I won't react. You whispering my name, thinking I won't be the same. Turn fiction into fact. See what you didn't know, bruises that I'll never show, slipping on your every jab. So tighten up your fist, step into the ring with this. I hope your mama's got your back. First round, you thought you would've knocked me down. Fifth round, bleeding out the side of your mouth. Final round, holding the sound of my name in the crowd. You hit a buzz. Oh, 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 oh. You hit a buzz. Oh, 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 oh. Just 'cause I took a break, you're making a huge mistake, thinking you can take the throne. Look at you trembling, step into the lion's den. Bet you wish you stayed at home, begging for mercy underneath your breath when I ain't even sweating yet. My legend's written in the stone, yeah. You're crying, Adrian. Defeat is now your only friend. Even your mama's gotta know. First round, you thought you would've knocked me down. Fifth round, bleeding out the side of your mouth. Final round, holding the sound of my name in the crowd. You hit. Throw your uppercut, try to hit me.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to In Time. We were hoping to maybe get Godless Granny on. If hopefully she can come on. She is streaming right now, and she's got a delightful guest. So we will have to see. We did want to proceed. We had been thinking of doing this as an overtime, but the reality is we're going to do, I think, a bit more of a breakdown and analysis than we normally would at overtime. So we just decided to do an impromptu In Time. Yeah, Michael, this is going to be one of the things we try to do on this show is to take news in context and to find the pieces of news that have slipped under people's radar for any number of reasons. We've been watching and paying very close attention to what's been going on with Trump. It has divided the nation. And, oh, dear Lord, my headset is running low on batteries, so you'll have to excuse me. I'm going to connect this for 1 second. I do apologize. Give me 1 sec. There we go. So we try to find things that have slipped under the radar and say why we think they're important. The insurrection has divided this country and has, it's funny, I remember when the Alito decision first came out, we streamed that immediately, and we took a look at that and said that we believed it was legit, and that it was probably a roadmap to dismantling Roe v. Wade. We explained why, and we explained what we anticipated seeing in the coming future. I'm very proud of the people who brought us that and our ability to bring it to you, and having done that one particularly accurately, I think. We became aware of a case that has been filed to the U.S. Supreme Court. It was filed September 1st, so that would be 5 days ago. And it hasn't been reported on, but it has been filed. They do have it, and they're going to decide whether or not to take it. We believe it is the culmination of what we described as a plan to not only overturn Roe v. Wade, but to legitimately and completely make abortion illegal in this country. We outlined that map for you and the steps that would be taken when the Alito decision first came out, and so far they have been following that on the grounds that we believe that is, in fact, their intention, and we've discussed several times why, and we'll probably discuss it a little more a little later in tonight's show, but we do believe it is this Supreme Court's intention to ban abortion across all states in this country, make it completely illegal. That's our view. And so what we have been looking for is for a case that would let them do that. The Dobbs decision did not let them do that. All it would let them do is graciously kick the decision back to the states. But we believe even in that, they telegraphed that they would be willing to go much further if a case presented itself. Such a case has now presented itself. It's a little hard to say what the case is called. It started as Benson. Actually, it was Benson versus McKee. However, that even wasn't the first iteration of it. It was Benson versus whoever the governor of Rhode Island was when it first came out, and then they've got a new governor. That was McKee. It's still under McKee, but the petitioners, there's a lot of them, and two fetuses have made this petition to the Supreme Court. We're going to discuss their status and how and why two fetuses are petitioning the Supreme Court. Would like to clarify a few things before we get going. It's clarified in the petition that they are no longer fetuses. Both of them have been born. But for the intents and purposes of this petition and for the cases that they're discussing about, these were two unborn fetuses that were petitioning the U.S. Supreme Court. Well, actually, that wasn't even because it was older than that. That filed a suit in Rhode Island. So in order to understand what this suit actually does, you need to understand a little something about how we got here. It does get a little complicated, but if you pay attention, focus on the components as we get there, it's actually not too bad. This all centers around a case in Rhode Island. What happened? Rhode Island was born. It became a state. It outlawed abortion. Abortion was illegal in Rhode Island for about 180 some odd years, completely illegal. When Roe v. Wade came along, Rhode Island chose to recognize Roe v. Wade and accepted it, and found that a number of their laws, including a law that made killing an unborn fetus a criminal act, that none of those laws were really tenable anymore. They were not repealed, but they were basically, for all intents and purposes, moot and ignored in light of Roe v. Wade. In, I want to say, May 11th of May 11th of 2019, they passed a new bill. The bill was, actually, let me get the name of the bill because it's going to be important. The bill was, oh dear Lord, of course I have forgotten, and I've got a lot of, there's a lot to this. The name of the bill was, it was a bill ensuring privacy. We'll get to the name of it. It's often referred to as three letters. Like I said, I've been going through a lot. But the purpose of the bill, it's the RPA, it's the Reproductive Privacy Act, passed in 2019. What this bill did was essentially made Roe v. Wade the law of the land. This bill passed by the Rhode Island legislature and then signed by the governor did actually make abortion illegal, but it used the Roe v. Wade criteria and said that abortions were permitted through viability, or up until viability, and it defined viability at 24 months. And that was determined in conjunction with scientists and any number of doctors. That was essentially the medical opinion at the time. Now, and of course there we go. Now, immediately, a religious organization, Servants of Christ for Life. Yes, most of you following this show knew that was coming. Attempted to repeal the law, get the law overturned. They tried several times and failed. They tried multiple avenues and failed. A woman who henceforth shall be named Jane Doe was pregnant. She had a friend named, I believe, well, we don't know what her name is. Ostensibly Nicole Rowley, and she had a baby named Baby Roe. So these two women were both pregnant. The reason they decided to do this together was one child was below the age of viability, the other one was past the age of viability. And the argument that they made, amongst many others, was, at what point does a person have rights? Is it at the point of birth? Yada, yada, yada. We'll get into it. They sued and tried to get the law repealed. The grounds for this suit was as follows. Until the law in 2019 had been filed, the law of Rhode Island for 180 some odd years, 187, whatever the actual number was, as I said earlier, the law had actually enforced the, quote, rights of an unborn child. They recognized an unborn child as a person, and it was Rhode Island law that you could not abort the fetus. It was essentially murder. What these women did was they filed a suit on behalf of their children, which you can always do. You know, you can file a suit, in fact, on behalf of any number of people. That's also essentially what a class action lawsuit is. They filed a suit on behalf of their children, saying that their children had had their rights taken away by this law, and it had happened without due process, in particular the 14th Amendment. These unborn fetuses had their rights and their right to life stripped by the governor at the time, who was named in the suit, with the passage of this new law that allowed abortion up until viability. Again, and this is important, one of the unborn children represented was viable. The other one was not at the time of the suit, and that was deliberate. They lost the suit. They overturned that suit to the Supreme Court of Rhode Island on appeal. That appeal is in the description below. You can find it. We will end up having to discuss that to some extent, but they appealed it. They lost the appeal. That loss came in, I think, May of this year. September 1st of this year, just 5 days ago, they filed with the U.S. Supreme Court saying that the appeal of the original decision should have been allowed. That is what is now facing the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court can do any number of things. What we at this point believe, they have not accepted the appeal. And not everybody who appeals the Supreme Court gets hurt. All we know at this moment is that the appeal has been filed. A press release outlining the appeal is in the description below, as is the appeal in its full, as presented to the U.S. Supreme Court 5 days ago. I'm going to read from the press release, and then we're going to talk about what the appeal is trying to do and what we anticipate is going to happen. In short, I'm going to cut to the chase, and then we'll get to the how and why, because it's important. Unfortunately, it's important. These details are going to matter, I think, and they're going to matter a great deal. What they're trying to do essentially is, if this does what I believe it's attempting to do, I suspect the court will take it, judging based on their last actions, but we're going to get into that. If they take it, I suspect they will rule that the appeal should have been permitted. Believe it or not, that doesn't mean they win their case. But if the Supreme Court rules that way on this particular case, that will immediately ban all abortions across the United States of America. We're going to get into the how and why on that, but at this point, I believe that's the intent, and at this point, I believe there's a better than not likelihood that it will reach that point. That's why we're covering it today. So let's get into what it says and how it works. First is the press release. The press release was put out on September 1st. It's Baby Mary Doe and Baby Roe ask the U.S. Supreme Court to complete the unfinished work of Dobbs. Dobbs is the decision that overturned Roe v. Wade. We've discussed it before. Remember, it did not ban abortions. What it did do was say that it would be up to the states, and if a state wanted to ban abortion, they were permitted. I believe that this Supreme Court does want to ban abortion, but because of the way an appeal works, they did not have the power to on the Dobbs decision. All they could do was kick it down to the states. Now, again, and they break up the parties that are suing into three parties. First is the parents, who are suing on behalf of, quote, the unborn children. The second set of parties is the unborn children. And the third set of parties is the nonprofit religious organization Servants of Christ for Life. Those are the three sets of petitioners. The court may call this whatever. Who knows what the hell they're going to call it by the time all said and done. It looks like in the press release it was essentially Doe V. It doesn't even say that here, but we are calling it. I think probably the best thing to call it would be either Doe v. McKee or Benson v. McKee. At any rate, it's McKee is the governor, and he is the one who argued the state's position or he is representing the state, so they're suing him in his capacity as governor. They're not suing him personally. So that's why it's versus essentially the governor of Rhode Island. Quote, as a result of the U.S. Supreme Court's overruling of Roe and Casey in the Dobbs v. Jackson, the court overruled its Roe holding that stated that, quote, the word person, as used in the 14th Amendment, does not include the unborn. Baby Mary Doe, Baby Roe, and Catholics for Life, Servants for Christ for Life are asking the U.S. Supreme Court to now, once and for all, answer the question of what the phrase, quote, any person means in the 14th Amendment. We're going to get into what they've done here. This is important. The case began as a challenge to the constitutionality of Rhode Island's 2019 so-called Reproductive Privacy Act. Rhode Island courts dismissed the original case based on their reliance on Roe and Casey. Dobbs said that the law is no longer good. Throughout their case, Baby Mary Doe and Baby Roe both claimed the protection of due process and equal protection clauses of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. This case is unique because it was brought by so-called pre-viable and post-viable children. And it has already worked its way through the state court system, arriving at the U.S. Supreme Court door just in time. Fancy that. Quote, this is a question of law, said Diane Messenger McGree, attorney for the petitioners. No state court or legislature can answer this question. It is solely for the United States Supreme Court to tell us what the phrase, quote, any person means in due process and the equal protection clauses of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. The petition filed by Baby Mary Doe and Baby Roe today possess the very pointed questions: do unborn human beings at any gestational age have any rights under the United States Constitution, or has Dobbs relegated all unborn human beings to the status of persona non grata in the eyes of the United States Constitution, below corporations and other, even fictitious, entities? The petition presents English law, common law, federal law, equitable law, dates going back to the 35th and 40th Congress, and other esteemed authorities supporting the petitioner's argument that deeply rooted in our nation's history and tradition, the word human being has been used synonymously with person. The petitioners also asked the U.S. Supreme Court to take the case in order to decide whether the classification of Rhode Island's RPA makes whether the classification Rhode Island's RPA makes between viable and non-viable humans deserves a heightened level of judicial scrutiny and is unconstitutional under the United States Constitution. Alternatively, the the petition filed today asks the U.S. Supreme Court to vacate the decision of the Rhode Island Supreme Court, which was based exclusively on Roe v. 𝗂𝐚𝐥𝐸 regarding the petitioner's claim, and send it back to the Rhode Island courts for re-argument with instructions from the U.S. Supreme Court in light of Dobbs. The preamble to the United States Constitution created two classes of sovereignty, ourselves and our posterity, apparently on equal footing. The understanding that our posterity includes living human beings, i.e., lives in being, i.e., human beings, is consistent with the meaning of prosperity in 1776. What did they do here? They did a number of interesting things that should concern anybody. First of all, they used the language that this is deeply rooted in U.S. history and tradition. The reason that's important is because that was the very language used in the Dobbs decision as to whether or not something could be considered law. We've discussed before, I won't get into it too much. Anyone who's been on the show regularly or watched it regularly knows what I'm talking about. But essentially, they said if it's not deeply rooted in tradition, it's not protected by the U.S. Constitution under the non-enumerated clause. What they're saying here, this is literally a signal to Alito saying, hey, buddy, we know what you're doing, and we're on the same team. They're using the exact same language to get what I believe is the desired result Alito wants. They also made two interesting claims. The first is they said that in the vacating of or overturning of Roe and 𝗂𝐚𝐥𝐸, they necessarily overturned the use of the word person in the 14th Amendment. That is not necessarily true, and in fact, I think that that's probably an indefensible statement. Having said that, it wouldn't shock me if the court wanted a chance to clarify that, but that certainly is not a tenable statement to the best of my recollection of the Dobbs decision. Having said that, the other thing that they've done is, just in case that doesn't work, they have defined, believe it or not, the difference between a person and any person, saying that in the Roe v. Wade case, they defined a person, but the Constitution doesn't refer to a person, it refers to any person. And they said that any person actually typically, and I hate to say this, I understand the argument and kind of concur, that any person has a broader scope than a person. This is why people hate lawyers. That doesn't mean that they should revisit it, but I see the argument, and it's an interesting argument. It's holy smoke. So the argument is, and what they say going forward is not a person, but any person. And we're going to get into the brief for a little bit, but the brief is going to discuss the difference between a person, which was defined in Roe and 𝗂𝐚𝐥𝐸, and any person, which they say has not been defined, and that the Dobbs decision now demands that be defined. That's just the press release. So to get into what we are talking about now, and to once again, sort of reframe this as easily as possible. Abortion had been outlawed in Rhode Island for a very, very long time. Roe v. Wade essentially overturned that. they decided to essentially codify Roe v. Wade into law. They still banned abortion, but they used the Roe v. Wade metric of viability and said anything before that could be terminated. And if I recall, the law was pretty explicit and said it was a woman's choice up until 24 weeks past that. You could still have an abortion, but only if it was a medical necessity. So that was the law passed May 11th of 2019. That is the Reproductive Privacy Act, the RPA. This group and these two fetuses challenged the act, saying that that act overturned the 180 years of precedent, and that the fetus, both viable and unviable, since two fetuses were named in the lawsuit, were having their rights taken away from them by this new law, and that they were entitled to 14th Amendment protection. So that's the argument. It got thrown out of court. It appealed. It lost its appeal. It is now appealing to the U.S. Supreme Court. We're going to take a look at that appeal. Now, it is entirely possible that the U.S. Supreme Court tosses it, and they may. I don't think they will, but why might they? Well, a lot goes into whether or not a court is going to hear a case. A lot of thought goes into it. And the court is not beyond picking cases based on optics. They're not above picking or denying a case because, yeah, they kind of like to rule on that, but this isn't the case where they want it. I'm a huge fan of, well, no, I won't get into that one right now, I guess. But anyways, so who knows? And if they determine that there is something crazy about this, if they don't like the lawyer, they know the lawyer and the lawyer is disreputable or something like that, they may just say no and wait for another one. We knew this was coming. We knew a case like this was going to show up. It may get rejected. I strongly suspect it's going to get accepted. And if it is, things are going to change. Anyways, we have a link to the actual filing in the U.S. Supreme Court. That is in the description. So essentially, when they lost for any number of things. One of them was a lack of standing. It was the argument that you'd expect. The Rhode Island Supreme Court, much to its credit, was like, sorry, a fetus doesn't have standing to sue. The parents don't have standing for X, Y, and Z. And then they really hit the what is it? Somebody for Christ. Who is it? It's Servants of Christ for Life. It's like, you guys really don't have standing, but they've stuck with it, and I have a sneaking suspicion I know where the money's coming from. But at any rate, so in the introduction to this, they spell out exactly what they're looking to do and why they think there is a sales pitch in this. It's like, hey, this is why the court really wants to take a look at this case, and it's they all read this way. This is nothing different. But anyway, so. Quote, this court in Doe v. Jackson avoided the question of when prenatal life is entitled to any rights enjoyed after birth. The petitioner's case presents an opportunity for the court to meet this inevitable question head on. That's a gamble. You have to be gambling that you think they want to do that. I tend to agree. I think they do. So the person writing this knew what they were doing. This court holds that Roe was, quote, egregiously wrong from the start. And so they argue person. They say that's if Roe was egregiously wrong, you got to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. So the personhood. The 14th Amendment has no textual definition for the term any person therein, neither includes nor excludes unborn human beings. They are saying that really what they want, okay, this is going to take a minute. They suggested that They'd love to have a unanimous decision, or not unanimous, a unilateral decision made on what constitutes life. But barring that, what they would like to see, and this is the minimum baseline of what they're asking, and this is extremely fucking important. We are asking that this court, oh no! Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry. It's all legalese, so I'm trying to figure out how to read it. The minimum line that they're asking for is for the decision to deny the appeal be overturned. Now, this is very, very important. If that happens, it doesn't mean that they've won the case. It means that they've won the appeal, and the case has to be heard again. It doesn't matter. The reason it doesn't matter is there's only one possible grounds. The only one they argue here, and the only one that's really at issue for whether or not the appeal can be overturned. Sorry, whether or not the striking of the appeal can be overturned. There's only one grounds for that. And that is that the rights of the plaintiffs were not properly recognized. In this case, the only plaintiffs that would have standing in that would be the 2 unborn fetuses. So if this court says, yes, we agree you should have won your appeal and it has to go back and be retried, abortion is done in this country. The reason is the only grounds for saying that is the very grounds that the that the Supreme Court in Rhode Island tossed out. The Supreme Court in Rhode Island said these are unborn fetuses. They do not have rights, and they threw it out. If you overturn that, you're saying they do have rights. So if the U.S. Supreme Court accepts this, basically the options are they look at it and they say, no, we think the Rhode Island Supreme Court did a great job. We're done. That's one possibility. That's not going to happen. But that's one possibility. Another possibility, we don't want to decide this. This is a thorny issue. Let's let Rhode Island work it out. So we're going to grant your appeal, and you get a new, you've got to relitigate this whole thing. That's it. Abortion is dead if they do that. The only grounds for doing that is that and they don't even have to say it. It's just set the precedent, and everybody who wants to challenge abortion going forward says, hey, the U.S. Supreme Court recognized the rights of 2 unborn children. That's it. Or, and what I think at this point is the most likely, they're just going to say, yep, you get rights at conception. Those are the possibilities. But understand, the base minimum that they are asking for is for the loss on their appeal, their challenge to the appeal to be overturned so that they can appeal it and then actually try the case again. That's what they say they're asking for. That's the low bar. If they get that, abortion's gone. And that's the low fucking bar. All right, we've got a $5 super chat, Sinister Porpoise. I have no good recursive jokes. I've told them all at the beginning of this sentence. Oh, I needed that. Thank you. I appreciate that. I needed the levity. I don't know. I will confess when I'm trying to tell like loads of puns. If I have a minute and if I'm in front of the computer, I just look up puns and then I just start tossing them in. So I do that, but I don't think there's a way. I don't think there's a repository of recursive jokes out there. So I think you're just coming up with this shit. Oh dear Lord. All right. So thank you, Porpoise, very much. I really appreciate your support. Thank you. All right. So, all right. So this appeal is asking for a number of things, but if they get even the minimum of what they're asking for, and they said something very cute in this. Let me see if I can. I think I'm about to get to it. What they basically said was this court doesn't even need to address, getting lost in any of the minutia in, what constitutes life and what doesn't. And, all this court really needs to do is, let the lower court decide it by, allowing us to have our appeal. So, reverse that decision and we can have our thing. The problem is if they reverse that decision, they've decided. There's no way to reverse the decision without deciding. It's cute. And this isn't uncommon. I mean, this isn't like particularly, it's All right, so they say that the RPA is illegal because it violates the rights of their unborn children. They say what I quoted earlier: do unborn human beings at any age have rights or not? And let's see, they get a little bit into that argument. I'm going to skip most of that. Let's see, where did the other... All right, so that is the... Make sure. I've got too many court filings around here. This is, I mean, it was just trying to untangle the Gordian knot of how this got to the U.S. Supreme Court was fun. All right, but I think the biggie, one of the biggest parts, and again, you can find this if you want to look at it. Yeah, how can these people have standing? Real question. Well. I could, yeah, Brooks. Yeah, I'll get into the argument. I've touched on it a bit, and we'll get into it a bit more. Like I said, the actual, if you want to read it, the rejection of standing comes from Roe. Roe defined a person as someone who has been born. That was defined in Roe. What they're arguing is now that Roe's essentially been overturned, and it was called, quote, a bad decision. They're like, that means everything from Roe is on the table, including this. And so what they're saying is this is not a good way to measure a person. And so what they do is, and this is scary because it means they know they're taught this is aimed at Alito. This is aimed at Alito. Legal protections for unborn human beings are objectively deeply rooted in this nation's history and tradition. Okay, again, that's the Washington test, or the Washington standard that Alito used in the Dobbs decision. That's the standard that he referenced in the gay marriage decision, that he said, you know, that's how we should know whether or not gay marriage should be legal. And by the way, gay marriage shouldn't, because he was on the dissent on that one. And that's the standard that Thomas used when he came out and said we have to revisit gay marriage, anti-sodomy laws, and basically everything except loving, coincidentally. So they are using that exact same language, and they are echoing that language back at Alito and Thomas in this. So they will take this unless they are aware of something I'm not, and they may be. This may be an unheard of lawyer. This may be. I don't know the lawyer. I didn't research the lawyer, but there are ones they have refused to take. To hear cases that they were dying to hear, but because it was a lawyer that was just a clown and in their view would undermine the reputation and integrity of the Supreme Court, they didn't take it. They're like, we'll get another case like this. Just wait a minute, there'll be another one. They got plenty of appeals to the Supreme Court, so they pick and choose, and they take a lot of things into account. You'd like to think it's just the merits of the case. Yeah, not really. Traditionally, the words human being have been used synonymously with person, and were consistently and commonly understood to mean humans both born and unborn. Now, what they do is they cite a lot of common law going back. They make some arguments. They also cite a more recent case. That was a Rhode Island case, actually. It was in 1938. Believe it or not, that's common. Or not common, that's recent compared to, I mean, they are, and this is what Alito said he wants. We said before, Alito gave them a roadmap to this. Quote, Rhode Island held that a child was entitled to share the income of a trust from the date of her father's death rather than the date of the child's subsequent birth. So this was a Supreme Court of Rhode Island decision. A man died, and he had a significant inheritance. He had, I think, 2 born children, but his wife was pregnant with their third. The question was, is that child entitled to the inheritance because the child exists in the womb, or is the child not, because he actually only has 2 children and a pregnant wife. The court ruled that the unborn child was in fact an heir and was entitled to the property, as if the child had in fact been born, and said, quote, there was no sound reasoning for treating the child differently from her brothers in the matter. So what they argue is that logically you are now being incoherent. If the argument is that an unborn child can inherit and is in fact an heir of the man, then how can you say that unborn child is not a person? So they make a number of other arguments. They argue about the difference between, they argue how can viability be the indicator, and then that's why, again, they've had 2 fetuses in the lawsuit. One was viable, one was not. Both have since been born. And again, just to be clear, and I said this at the beginning because I knew this might get complicated, this suit started more than 2 years ago. They are now 2 years old. Both these children have been born, but the courts and all parties have stipulated that for the intents and purposes of the lawsuit, they're talking about fetuses because the lawsuit was brought when neither child had been born. Welcome to our nightmare, folks. This is what we've been doing. And like I said, I mean, this case has not been accepted. It is entirely possible that this will not be accepted. I'm not betting on it. I wouldn't be spending this time here explaining this to our audience in this level of detail and spent half the day reading it if we didn't think there was a very strong possibility. We know, we've already explained how and why we know. That'll be for another show if we're going to cover it again. We know they're looking for a case like this. This is that case. This case has everything they want, and the people doing this already thought of it. There's a reason there are 2 fetuses on this. One viable, one not. They stand on both sides of that. They're challenging that line, but if they lose the challenge, you still have 1 kid. Sorry for putting it that bluntly, but just in terms of strategy, this isn't the greatest strategy I've ever seen, but it's a good one. This is a good one. And it's clear they know how to talk to Alito. They're speaking his language quite deliberately. They also get into the difference between any person and a person. Unfortunately, entire law careers have been made on distinctions like that, and I think that is yes, I think they can make that distinction, and I think that'll hold. So that's the case we're looking at. It is going to be for this coming term on the Supreme Court if they accept it. I have zero doubt in my mind they've been looking to accept it. If Thomas is not impeached, which I think there's a possibility of, but I don't think fast enough for this. I think it's going to be a while, and there's a lot going on right now. It's going to depend a lot on what the January 6th committee comes up with. I mean, anybody else under any other time would have been gone. It was a clear conflict of interest. He was the sole dissent on a case to protect the records, which included damaging, we learned, included implicating his own wife in a criminal conspiracy. He should have been gone. But not to be. Anyways, Not Brooks says, super glad they're doing this. Keep pushing fascists. Nothing mobilizes women like this issue. I got to tell you, one of the reasons I decided, the fact is almost nobody knows about this case. One of the reasons I decided to go with it, and it looks like we do have Godless Granny coming in. So let me, one of the reasons I decided to go with it, and let me get her in here. So yes, we will have Godless Granny joining us. In fact, she can probably hear me now, and she should be live. Can you hear me? Oh, I can hear you. Can you hear me? All right, we'll work on that. I just realized. So let me. Oh, I can definitely hear her, but and I don't know. Oh, she didn't have her headset on. So we'll wait for her. As soon as she gets her headset on, and she may need to plug it in. I guess she's plugging it in now. I'm going to give her a hard time about this. in general, sound issues tend to be, you can always blame in time when there's a sound issue. If there's a sound issue, you can blame in time. Now I get to say, blame godless granny who didn't plug her headset in. How are you?
I am fine. I just did my whole show with Andrew Seidel without the headset because I generally do not use it if I only have one guest, and I use it if I have multiple guests. I find there's occasionally a problem with multiple guests, but with one guest there isn't an issue. So I wasn't using it for that show.
Oh, okay. Now we have now there appears to be. Now let me just. Oh, there it is. Oh, right. We just had a minor issue getting your image into the camera on this end, but you know what? I don't listen to my live chat. My live chat will tell you I have no idea what I'm doing. I am an expert at this. You are in good hands, and we solved the problem. There you are. You came at a very good time. I ended up I've done we've gone over huge elements of this, but I was going to sort of go over and review it from the beginning. But Not Brooks had said something that I thought was very important, and then I'd like to introduce Godless Granny, and would like to start over this because this is, I think, really big. But Not Brooks had said, I'm glad they're doing this because nothing mobilizes women more than attacking this issue, and I think that's true. But it now may not be because everybody is so hung up on Trump and on the records and are we about to have a civil war that now is the time that they can do this, and everybody's like, it's like whack-a-mole with shit. So, all right. This is Godless Granny. Godless Granny, could you do me a favor and just introduce yourself to our audience? Now, half of your mods are also my mods, so I think a number of people, and we've got, Purple rhymes with orange, Maya's here, Titan, Lance is here. Oh my God, Lance. So, but nonetheless, for those of us who don't, and her channel is already down in the description below. So please go check it out. And she was having a marvelous interview. I got to go in and watch some of that before this show. But so tell us a bit about yourself, please.
Okay, I am Godless Granny. I do content that is first and foremost anti-theism, but I also do a lot in promoting LGBTQ rights and women's rights. I do have a law degree, although I have not practiced law for quite some time. I'm currently retired. I do have 5 grandchildren, thus the Godless Granny. And I do have a YouTube channel where I put out usually a live stream and a produced video every week.
Well, yeah, that sounds a little fancy, a produced video. God, we pretty much play it by ear over here.
Maybe I should say scripted.
Yeah, we do a couple of those, but I don't know if you. So we have everything here is usually, time related. So we have a show that's just informal discussions, and we'll talk about anything. We'll talk about, sometimes it'll be serious stuff. Sometimes it'll be like, oh God, yeah, I remember when this happened and I had to go up the hill both ways, to and from school or whatever, whatever it is. So that's downtime. So this is right now you're on in time. This is where we do like more formal discussions, but it's usually a discussion or an interview. If it's news, it's overtime. Those are just the straight news shows. Comedy channel show that we did for a little bit, Stitch in Time, and where they give me only 5 minutes to talk about a subject is, of course, and those are scripted because I can't. Oh God, 5 minutes is pretty tough, but that's Nick of Time. So we are such geeks over here. It's not even funny. All right. Can I get a sound check from you? Oh no, that cleared. All right. If I ask you for a sound check, it's just we've been getting static on the thing. So if you just make a sound, any sound, hi, hello, Nick, you're the greatest host ever, anything like that, take your pick. Usually clears up the sound. All right. one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because I had seen your discussions on legal topics, and you know what you're doing, and you did practice law. You practiced law in Texas, if I recall. Is that where you practiced, or is that just where? Okay,
that is correct. Mm-hmm.
All right. So, and that's actually no joke because, it's a different world, but that's they handle things differently and have different views on the laws, but they're really pretty serious over there. So, do you know anything about this? Or I gave you about a 3 or 4 minute heads up before this, so I expect you to. What do you know?
All right. I don't know a lot about it, but one of the things that I think is the biggest hurdle that this is going to face is the can't talk for all of a sudden, the IVF.
You've been streaming for a while, so you're probably tired. I appreciate you coming.
But yeah, in vitro, that's what I'm trying to say, is in vitro fertilization. If a fetus is a person from the moment of conception, then test tube babies are persons. We cannot freeze embryos because those are people. We can't freeze people. We cannot discard unwanted embryos. We can't implant embryos knowing that several of the embryos are going to die in the process. It's going to completely destroy the industry.
I hadn't considered that. I think you're absolutely right. Obviously, if at any point of gestation you've got a human being, then that also means most fertility. Now you got me to it. I think it's contagious. Most fertility treatments would go out the window because you might fertilize the egg actually outside the body and then implant them, and you always implant more than you need because you expect you're going to lose some, and if you don't, you have to do a selective reduction later anyway, and all that goes out the window. I had not considered that. I don't think Alito, Thomas, or what's his name, care. I don't think so. I agree with you. That's another really big problem. I don't think that's going to slow them down any.
I do know believers who feel that IVF should be outlawed because they feel that it is murder. And so that there are people that are that extreme, obviously. But most of them change their minds if they can't have a baby.
Well, that was the joke. Right after the Dobbs decision that I love. Somebody was just like, I wonder how many people took a pregnancy test today and discovered that they're Democrats.
Another point is if a fertilized egg is a person, then a woman can sue for child support immediately upon discovering that she's pregnant. And is a woman entitled to child support? And if she then miscarries, obviously she would no longer be entitled to child support, but does a man still owe her child support for the time until the miscarriage?
One of the arguments that's used in this brief is a Rhode Island case where a man had 2 sons. His wife was pregnant with a daughter, and then the man died. His will said that everything he had should go to his children, and the 2 sons actually wanted to keep it for themselves, and the mother sued on behalf of the unborn child and won, saying that the child was in fact an heir despite not having been born, and it explicitly said that the child was an heir as of the moment of death, not at the moment of her birth. So, and at least they're being consistent. I mean, it seems to me like that would be sort of along the lines you're talking about. Yeah. Well, so let me explain briefly where this comes about. So, and the language that I see in this strikes me as a genuine attempt to get Alito to take it. They use a lot of very concerning language. If you've been keeping up with the latest decisions, they basically use the Washington standard that he talked about, which is, well, it's only law if it's deeply rooted in tradition. And of course, gay marriage isn't deeply rooted in tradition. It's really hard to remember this. I grew up in the 80s. That's easy to remember. But the U.S., if you take all the average human being on the planet, 2/3 of them don't get to choose who they marry. 2/3 of them don't get to choose 2/3 of them. It's gotten better since the 80s, but there are still huge swaths of the population who don't get to choose who they marry. You know what's a tradition in the U.S.? You get to choose who you marry. That's the tradition. Jesus, I'm sorry. I get triggered by some of this, so you'll have to excuse me. I know you're the same way, so I'm preaching to the choir. So here's what happened. It turns out Rhode Island had actually banned abortion almost when it became a state. It had been banned for 187 years. Abortion was banned in Rhode Island. After Roe v. Wade, the ban was effectively overturned, but they didn't, repeal it. They didn't, take the law off the books or anything. But they decided to kind of correct that oversight. And in 2019, they had an act, a Privacy Act, that guaranteed the minimum standard that was already in Roe, saying as of viability, abortion was completely legal. After viability, it was legal if it was medically necessary. So that was the standard enshrined in Rhode Island. This organization, which is, oh dear Lord, what's the name of these guys again? So this lawsuit is brought by two women. There are two unborn fetuses. Yes, the fetuses are listed on the suit. And a religious institution, which I know really is going to shock you. Yeah.
Catholics for life.
Yes, that was it. Thank you.
I've pulled up the brief in front of me while you're talking.
Oh, perfect. All right. So, yeah, I've quoted a few interesting pieces of the brief, but so they basically filed against the governor of Rhode Island, who had signed that into law, and they said, here's the problem. Our children have had their rights protected by Rhode Island law for 187 years. You are now taking away those rights without due process, the 14th Amendment, ergo, we want to repeal the 2019 law. They lost. Mm-hmm. I know. I was shocked, too. They lost. And they appealed. The appeal went to the Rhode Island Supreme Court, which ruled on early May this year. And what they said was, they for the most part, they said, look, there's, let me rephrase that. Okay, so they appealed, and they also argued that now, since the Dobbs decision, Roe v. Wade is no longer valid, so that invalidates one of the original reasons for throwing out their case the first time. And basically, the Rhode Island Supreme Court not only didn't agree with that, but basically said they had no standing, said the parents didn't have standing because the parents didn't suffer any injuries. The Christians for Life had no standing because they have absolutely no business in this lawsuit whatsoever. And the unborn fetuses are not a person by the Roe decision. That has now been appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. It was sent to the U.S. Supreme Court September 1st, so that was 5 days ago. So there are a couple of questions. One, what's the likelihood they accept it? They haven't accepted it yet. We don't know. Given my personal view that, can I get a sound check from you real quick? Oh, never. It just happens for a split second and then it's clearing up. I don't know. You gotta find the source of that just started. I blame his Andering. Yeah, he's in the live chat, so I get to blame him. So first question is, do they take it? For me, that's not much of a question. I think they're going to. Sometimes they don't, but I think my view is they have been looking for this for a while. I think they wanted to make abortion legal across this country. They couldn't do that in Dobbs. Couldn't do it in Dobbs. That's not the way the law works. So now they can. This is tailor-made to what they would want to see. The other thing is the two fetuses in this. One was viable, one was not. So in the brief, they make a couple arguments about why viability is not a good metric. But even if those fail, because there was a viable child in this, it's like they know what they're doing, and then they decide to argue. So they argue Roe has been essentially overturned, which means that the claim in Roe that a person must necessarily be born to get 14th Amendment rights is no longer valid. So they ask this court to once and for all decide whether or not a human being at any gestational period has rights. That's what they're asking for. They're also saying, if you're not willing to answer that question, then just grant us the appeal, declare that because of the Dobbs decision, the Roe decision cannot be relied upon, and let us have our appeal. The problem is, if they do that, the only grounds for that would still be that the two fetuses have standing. So the second they do that, at least my read is, abortion is now illegal. It's they haven't declared it, but if they say that those fetuses have standing, they've done that. What are your thoughts?
My first thought is something that came up in my conversation with Andrew Seidel just an hour ago. And that is, I don't think this is going to fly for one reason, and that is insurance. If a fetus is, or an embryo, or a zygote is a person from the moment of conception, then that embryo would be entitled to purchase life insurance. Or a parent would be able to purchase life insurance on their zygote. 80% of all fertilized eggs do not result in a live birth. Over half of them are expelled without the mother even knowing she had ever conceived, and about a third of them are miscarried. If a woman is able to buy life insurance on an embryo, which is going to have a high probability of not surviving to birth, then insurance companies are going to have to pay out life insurance on miscarriages. And I don't foresee the life insurance industry as not getting involved in this, because the ramifications for them are just too great.
But the life insurance is not a right, though, right? So, I mean,
no, it's not. But if the fetus, or if the embryo is a person, then the life insurance company doesn't have any right to deny the parents the ability to buy insurance on this person.
I think that may be true, but well, first of all, I think any insurance company can actually deny anybody for insurance. I don't think unless
you can deny an individual for individual reasons, but you can't deny a whole class of people. You can't make it a policy that, okay, we don't insure Black people, or we don't insure gay people, or we don't insure unborn people.
All right. Would they then perhaps, because they do have a right to make an actuarial decision based on what is the likelihood they'll have to pay out that insurance policy, so they can aggregate and say, well, this many at this stage, given your risk factors, this many children, quote children, will be the language they would be using, would die before being born. Ergo, we can give you a policy. This would be the payout, but this is what it would cost. They could still do that.
Correct. They could price it out of anybody's range. That is true. They absolutely could do that. I just see too many ramifications for the insurance industry, though, as a whole for them to even want to touch it. And it's not so much that it's a huge impact to the industry as the fact that that is a powerful industry. And I see them getting involved and saying, don't do this, you could hurt us. And I think they're going to be too powerful to ignore.
I'm curious. That's a good one to keep an eye out for. So thank you. I mean, Alito. If there's anything that motivates Alito other than him wanting to really stick it to the left, and I read an interesting article on sort of his history and growing up actually in the 60s and really hating, because of what he saw in the 60s, hating the anti-establishment, hating the left, hating liberals, hating people who were causing disorder, and he's just got like this compulsive. It's like, I'm not sure. It's pop psychology. I've got no idea, but I'm like if they can do. I mean, the reality is, I have a very hard time thinking that there is anything that would dissuade Alito, Thomas, and I keep forgetting his name, Mr. I like to drink beer.
Kavanaugh.
I mean, the fact of the matter is, they had more than they need. Well, no, they didn't. It depends on how you split it with Roberts. But the fact that they passed the repeal, essentially the repeal of Roe v. Wade, the fact that they got Dobbs through, suggests to me. I have a hard time believing there's anything that's going to stop these guys from, if this case goes, and I think this case is going to go.
You're absolutely right. There might not be anything that will stop them. The real scary thing about this, though, is what this does to women who have miscarriages. Because, first of all, somebody can sue a mother on behalf of the unborn child for wrongful death. If a woman trips and falls and has a miscarriage, somebody can sue on behalf of the baby and collect damages for her injuring the baby. A woman could be prosecuted for falling down a flight of stairs because she's injured another person. Yeah, we already see this happening. This is already happening.
I hadn't thought of any of this, but now you got my mind going. The next I would think then is going to be determining what the woman eats, because if she's not eating properly, if she's not taking the right vitamins, if she's not doing the exercise that we believe she should be doing, you could sue on behalf of the child. Jesus. That thought had never even crossed my mind. I thought I was the dark one.
It's a scary time to be a woman.
Yeah. At
least in this country. I think it's time for the women to all move to Canada.
I'm listen, if Trump is a viable candidate, which I don't see how, but then again, so much that I didn't see. I mean, we can basically recast the last 4 years as shit Nick didn't see coming. But
you're not alone.
Yeah. If he ends up being a viable candidate, my wife and I have already talked about it, and we're like, I can work from basically anywhere. Her field happens to be highly sought after, especially in countries that value things like education, which, as it turns out, ours doesn't value all that much. So
not anymore.
No. Well, yeah, even at the height of it, we didn't really as much as we could. But she works in science, and I remember when Bush cut funding to the NIH, and it's like all of a sudden, and she works in academia. She worked in industry as well, but when she was working in academia, and all of a sudden, here are these academics trying to do all of this research, and they're competing now. They've got more projects than ever, competing for fewer funds than ever, and it just dramatically. And then and then France comes up and says, "Hey, guess what we do in France? We fund science. Want to come over?" And like, we. Oh, dear Lord. All right. Well, so, it's this is all pretty scary stuff. So, you have not had a chance to look at this. You have now only my rendition of roughly what the history is, which take with a grain of salt because I've only had a few hours with it. But what are your thoughts? Are your thoughts that this is a case that they are going to take? Do you agree that this is what they're looking to do?
I do agree that this is what they're looking to do. I don't think that this is the best test case for it. Just based on what you said, the due process rights, I don't think that they have any grounds there. Because if the governor has passed a law that they are finding has taken away their rights, that is due process. I mean, that's exactly how due process works. And so I don't think they have any grounds there. But on the other hand, with this court, they make up their own rules as they go along, and they don't really care. I mean, if this is what they want to do, they'll do it. Although I think there might be better test cases out there.
Well, I think everybody who wants to ban abortion knows that this is their chance to be in the history books, and they're all trying to get these cases. So they really can pick and choose. And this is the first that I've seen that looks like it meets the criteria. But I think you bring up a very good point, which is there's no rush. I mean, they'll have a dozen of these before the end of the year, so they can, All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on. So you've got it now. If you decide that anything else crosses your mind or suits your fancy that you'd like to mention and talk about, let me know. We'd love to have you back to discuss it when you've actually not been streaming for 6 hours straight and bragging about, oh yeah, we got Jason on right now, but it's like, oh yeah, okay, you go talk to the famous fancy ass liberal lawyer. Okay, but would love to have you back. Thank you very much for coming on. I know it was difficult because you didn't have much time, but we wanted to get as many. I'm not a lawyer, so we're like, let's get people who have experience in this area looking at it. So I sincerely appreciate you coming on. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. You see, Titan. You see, Titan. Guests do enjoy it. It's been such a hard time. All right, so we're going to keep an eye on this one, and as we are on everything, we are going to have downtime on Thursday with Commander Lance McMillan. He's going to be back. We're going to shoot the shit some more, and we're going to have on, Jenna is going to be on next week. We're going to be talking mental health. I'm looking forward to that one. I think that's going to be a really good discussion. And you're welcome back anytime. And thank you again for just like, we need a lawyer, I need a lawyer. Go hitting you out, and you came. So we really appreciate it. The link, again, to her channel is down at the bottom. Check it out. She was in the middle of I'm harassing her while she's doing an interview. I was like, we need you. She's like, I'm like doing a thing here.
We brought up your question. We did address your question. I took all the questions at the end, and we did get to your question.
Yeah, so I'd asked a question, so let's do that now, because I'd like to hear the answer. I'd asked a question about what's the likelihood of Clarence Thomas was in the when the Trump records were trying to be taken, and they had said no, you can't take the records, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, yeah, you can take the records. It's there was one dissent on that, and that was Thomas. And then it turns out in those records, Ginny Thomas was implicated in a crime. Whether he knew that or not, I don't know. He certainly should have known it was a possibility, and he should have recused himself. But now we're learning there's any number of other cases he should have recused himself. The Supreme Court, they actually don't have to. So he's not breaking a law, but then again, he can still be impeached. So the question is, what's going to happen, especially as more stuff comes out on his wife? And I will tell you, I have zero doubt in my mind Ginny Thomas leaked the Alito decision. I think she leaked it. So my question was, what is the likelihood of him getting impeached?
Andrew said basically zero. The court isn't going to be interested in impeaching him. And even if they did impeach him, it really wouldn't do anything, because Trump was impeached twice, and it had no effect. The impeachment has just simply lost its bite.
Crap! I was afraid he was going to say that. All right. Well, he's probably right. All right. Well,
he did have a different answer though that he felt was the way to go, which is court packing. And I had originally been opposed to court packing, but after listening to him, I've changed my mind.
Well, I would tweak it. I disagree with court packing in any and all circumstances. And FDR tried to pack the court, and as much as I love FDR, he shouldn't have done that. What I think you need to do, because even when you have the best of intentions, how many times the Republicans or the conservatives who support Alito have the best of intentions. This is going to backfire on them. It's going to backfire in a very big way. And Roberts is an incrementalist, and I think he's right. And I think when you make too many grand moves, you end up destabilizing the entire system, regardless of what your intents are. And this is a great example of it. I think there are a lot of things that we have to do to try to to limit what the court is doing. But what I would say is do either, we're going to add another, say, 10 justices, but you pick a agreed upon representative from the Republicans, and then the president of the United States, and they each get to choose, and then you horse trade it, and then bring all 10 in at a time. Or you say we're going to do 2 at the beginning of every term, every 4 years for the next 10 years, 12 years, whatever. And if you're 2 Democrats in a row, 3 Democrats in a row, then the Democrats have it. If it's 4, 5 Republicans in a row, the Republicans get it. But it's at every presidential term, 2, until the court's the size you want it. It's slow. It's a pain in the ass. But he is right. The court cannot continue with the number it's got now. It's smaller country. Yeah. Now, no. Does that sound too reasonable, or is that?
No, that's quite, and part of the reason that I did change my mind is because when people talk about court packing, FDR is exactly what came to mind for me, and his plan for court packing is much more reasonable and much smaller scale than what FDR had in mind. His plan wasn't exactly like yours, but it was very similar to yours.
Oh, okay, so it's Well, it's only packing if one person has the ability to add more than the majority members of the court. So,
packing might be a poor term for it. Basically, he wants to find a way to get that. Okay, our government is supposed to have a set of checks and balances, but the checks and balances are out of whack, and the Supreme Court is wielding way too much power. And so basically, he just wants to bring it back into check.
Yeah, I think he's probably right there. And the I understand diversity can be a dirty word for people on the right, and I try to be sympathetic to that because I think I understand how and why. And not every objection on the right is way far afield. But the advantage that diversity brings is any one human being lives such a narrow slice of all of the things that life has to offer. I've never killed anyone, never been in the military. I'm not a woman, so there's a whole host of experiences there I haven't had. And not having had them, I really can't I am a parent, right? But there are plenty of people who aren't. But the people who aren't don't really know what it's like to have kids. I'm sorry. That's either you've had them or you haven't. It changes everything. So the more people that you have on a court with a greater diversity of opinions, the better the likelihood you're going to get the right answer. It still doesn't guarantee it, but it dramatically improves the chances. So 9 is too small, and it's too small for such a large country and a greater diverse country. It's not about equality or representation or anything like that. It's the more diverse the court, the more it's going to represent the experiences of the diversity of the nation. It's really that simple. It's not that hard to understand. So, oh, dear Lord. Now, speaking of soapboxes, you've been listening to a lot of soapboxes today.
I have.
So you've been very patient. All right. Well, thank you so much. We're gonna, like I said, we'll be back on Thursday. Oh shoot, we have to do the. I forgot. We are gonna have. We do. We may end up doing an overtime rundown tomorrow night. We'll see. It's gonna get interesting. For a news channel. Business has been good, I guess. Good recently, whatever that means. All right. Thank you for coming, and it was a pleasure. You and I met at the Better Conference. It was a genuine delight meeting you. Thank you for coming, and I hope you'll come back.
I most certainly will. Thank you for having me.
I don't.